subject of the panel is international marketing, but I think we're going to talk about how they work with films and talent to expand their careers beyond just the borders of the US and into the world. I want to start by asking you both a little bit about how you got to where you are. They're fairly specific to what you do. So, Rick, how did you start?
Is this on? Yeah, I guess I always wanted to be in the movie business somehow, and especially after being in law school and dropping out of law school almost immediately. And I had a friend who worked at the William Morris agency, whatever an agency was. I had no idea. I just
was this in New York?
Yeah, in New York in 1968. And so I dropped out of law school, and a friend of mine got me an interview with the mailroom boss, because the agencies always start in the mailroom, agent trainees. And I started there in May of '68, started in the agency business, and walked out of the agency business 40 years later in 2008. So I guess either I was destined or, taken prisoner. But there I was.
You spent most of those 40 years at CAA, Creative Artists Agency, no?
I was at the William Morris Agency in New York from '68 to '76, then William Morris in California from '76 to '80, then Creative Artists Agency, CAA, from 1980 to 2008. Then I went to try my hand at running a production company, Morgan Creek Productions, and I did that for a couple of years and realized I'd rather be back in the talent representation business. So now I'm a manager and consultant to actors, actresses, directors, producers, financial funds, etc.
Just for anybody who doesn't know the clear distinction, what does an agent do in the US and what does a manager do?
Agents are, in the U.S., agents are specifically licensed by the state, and there are limitations and restrictions to what the agent can do. They can not take more than 10% commission on the client. It's literally illegal. An agent cannot do anything but negotiate the actors' deals, seek the employment, then negotiate the deals. Managers, on the other hand, are much closer to the client. They usually work in between, for lack of a better way of saying it, in between the agent and the artist is the manager. Doesn't mean agent doesn't communicate directly with the artist, but kind of in the scheme of things, it's the manager's in between. And manager has no financial restrictions. The manager just works closer to the artist, probably spends a lot more time, gives a lot more advice in a lot broader playing field than an agent does.
And a manager can produce movies also?
Yes, managers are not restricted. They can produce the movies.
So what kind of an agent are you known for being, Rick? I mean, give us some of your clients, over the years.
Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, Kevin Costner, Al Pacino, Anthony Hopkins, Francis Coppola, David Lynch, a lot of people.
Okay. So obviously you're working at the very top, the very high end of Hollywood production.
I have farther to fall than most people.
Leslie, you're on another side of the talent management business, not management, but the talent business, which is publicity, which you kind of were responsible for building as well as an industry, if you like, through the 90s, no? Tell us about your evolution.
Well, I did not always desire to be in the entertainment business or the movie business. I sort of fell into it. I got offered a better paying job at a better location with a shorter commute from my home. And it made sense at the time. So I started to work for Rogers & Cowan in Los Angeles, worked there for 3 years, Notice I am not saying the years.
Rogers & Cowan is a big publicity agency.
Oh, yes. Sorry, they're a big PR agency based in Los Angeles and New York. And in my for my work, I traveled to New York several times. Fell in love with New York City instantly and decided about 3 years into Rogers & Cowan that I wanted to live in New York. So I just made my mind up, and as positive thinking does take over sometimes, I got a job offer for another agency called PMK Public Relations to run their New York office. So I spent 23 years running that company's office in New York, and 7.5 years ago, I started my own company, which is now called 42 West Public Relations, and it too is bi-coastal, New York and Los Angeles offices. And the agency has grown in those 7.5 years. I literally started it in a back office of a friend's business with an assistant. We now have 85 employees, both coasts, and we've expanded from just representing movies, which is what I set out to do initially, to we have a talent division, a movie marketing division, or I should say an entertainment marketing division, talent, an awards division where we pursue anything from Grammys to Oscars and that whole sort of awards circuit, which we'll probably touch on as an important element to marketing in international marketing. We have a targeted marketing which specializes in Hispanic, urban, and Asian culture. And we have a digital division so that we can keep up with the whole social media, digital PR platforms and that.
And some of your clients over the years?
We've shared many of them.
All of his?
I think almost all of yours, yes. And Tom Hanks. We also have a lot of music clients, Rihanna, Lady Gaga. I'm going to try to give you some television clients, would be Conan O'Brien and, gosh, who else do we have in TV? I can't even think. So many of them, actually. We have...
But you personally work with a lot of filmmakers as well.
I work with... That's my sort of passion, is filmmakers. And Francis Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, Mike Nichols, Jonathan Demme, Wes Anderson.
A lot of the East Coast-based directors,
yes, but
actually.
it doesn't matter. It did when I first moved to New York. It did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But because of cell phones and the internet and everything else, it doesn't matter what coast you're on anymore at all.
And if they're a personal client of yours, what services are you providing for them?
For the directors in particular?
Yeah, directors, actors.
Well, it's different.
Yeah.
Even two directors are not the same. But for the directors, what you really do is, I think one of the reasons that I'm attracted to representing directors is sort of my motherly instincts, which is a director has taken a project and at minimum it's 3 years of his or her life, and usually a lot longer than that. And then they have to turn it over to these venal marketing people. And it's scary for them. And oftentimes the studio and the artist don't see things the same way. So I try to be the bridge. I try to help them find the best road to navigate.
This is long before the films come out.
Oh, yes. In the midst of production, you start talking about these things.
Yeah, but actors need mothers too.
They do. But they need so much more.
A bigger mother.
A bigger mother, exactly. And so you help them navigate the road between commercial success and what some artists would perceive as selling out. And you also help them stay informed. They don't necessarily know the best way to screen a movie or the timing when you should start doing something like that. So you keep them sort of in the loop and serve as the liaison between the studio and the director.
Well, it's always struck me as strange that we make assumptions that artists, and they are artists, every one of them has been gifted in some way and propelled in a direction that most of them, speaking for actors and actresses, and probably for a good portion of directors, literally couldn't or wouldn't do anything else. They'd be unable to and unwilling to. This is their calling. And so why we assume, and we constantly do, that they know or care anything about business? Why should they? They're entitled to, But just because they're making a lot of money doesn't mean they know what to do with it, how to conserve it, doesn't even really mean that they know how to make it. They just know how to do what they do. So somebody like Leslie or myself or frankly, David Unger, Hal Sadorf, the previous panel, and what Paula did, they are entrusted with that. Being an artist representative, I consider the greatest responsibility of all, because you're taking care of people's lives, and people who are people who need you can't do it unless you do it with them, for them.
But I also think that since we began representing these kinds of people, I think the biggest stars have come to realize and accept that marketing is part of the responsibility of making a movie. I think 30 years ago, there were actors who said, no, I do my work and my work speaks for itself.
And that was a sort of vulgar
thing. It was vulgar to publicize, to go out and
They always
stump.
felt they were doing somebody a favor. They weren't sure who, but they were doing somebody a favor by publicizing.
And I think, most famously, Robert De Niro and Sean Penn, for years, never did press, never.
Well, they're still not exactly chatty Cathys.
Well, they may not be Chetty Cathys, but they're trying.
Sitting across from them. Good. No.
But they are out there. They do interviews, maybe not well, but they do interviews. They do go on television. They do show up at premieres and walk red carpets and do things, run red carpets, things that never would they have deigned to do 30 years ago.
Why do you think that's changed? Because they own a part of the film and it's in their interests? Or?
Oh, I think that's part of it. I think in some instances that's definitely got a part of what it is. But I think the other part of it is they want to keep making movies. And if their movies aren't successful, they can't keep making
the
movies.
The public, the media, the business are unforgiving. You are only raised up in order to be brought down. And the public is fickle. There's there's very little long-term investment that the public will make with a given actor or actress. As soon as they let them down, either by a movie or two that doesn't do well, or looking bad in People magazine, or doing something foolish that they're quoted as speaking out for the wrong political candidate, you're over and out. So I think the artists know that they have to get it while it's hot. So they have to do that.
My husband was in the music business for years, and he always still speaks sort of enviously about movie stars, because in the music business, they would have one album. If it didn't make it, if they didn't tour, if they didn't work it, if that album didn't turn around and make a profit, that was it. And he always spoke enviously because, well, at least movie stars maybe get 2 shots or 3 shots to have a mediocre success or a failure before they're out of it.
Let's just go back to the basics of how the representatives work in concert with each other on a big star or a big filmmaker. The agent, the manager, the publicist. In the case of Tom Cruise, the producing partner. Are you all a team?
Oh, absolutely. Have to be in sync or it's spotted. And in many ways, it's hard enough to get a client to take advice that's good for them sometimes if they don't understand it or they don't agree with it, even though they're paying us for our expertise. So if it's unified, then
and because they'll ask each one of us.
Absolutely.
They won't just listen to what I think is the right answer and say, well, oh yeah, I'm going to go do that because Leslie said. He or she's going to hang up the phone and call Rick and go, won't even say, Leslie thinks I should do X. What do you think? Just say, what do you think about blah, blah? Should I go to Europe to promote this movie? Should I do whatever? And if there's a crack in our cohesiveness, they go right through it and wiggle out of the responsibility.
And the trick is it's not so much trick, the aim is getting the client to do something. Because I always said I could talk any client out of any offer, give me about 2 minutes, and they'll say no. But getting them to say yes That's the painstaking necessary thing.
So let's talk about the longevity of careers and how you work on that with media, with marketing, with choices of film, television, theatre. How do you keep somebody in the public eye or in the eye of other filmmakers for many, many years? I mean, look at Pacino, for example, Rick, a long-term client of yours. Obviously, he's a lifelong movie star.
Well, I started representing Al in 1986, and took a break when I was. He was right. Interesting, good question. It was right after Revolution, which was a disaster for him. The movie was a disaster. It just freaked him out completely, and he didn't work for several years. I signed him and realized he had to get back with a commercial venture. Everybody knew he was a great actor. He wasn't trying to prove his chops, that he's good. He needed a commercial movie if he was going to retain his status, which was severely imperiled. It's as often happens with a movie, it's a confluence of things, and it almost toppled him, that one movie. Nonetheless, we had to figure out what to do. In the movie, I and then urged him to do so, and he said yes, because, they say yes or no, was Sea of Love. And that put him back because it was a commercial movie. It wasn't the greatest piece of cinematic art and wasn't intended to be and didn't turn out to be. It was a commercial movie that showed Al off well. And you constantly have to do that, especially with somebody like Al, who is truly an artist. If left to his own devices, his tendency would to be in obscure art films. And he admits it. He does the commercial aspect of things, which of course he's learned to enjoy, but he does that to allow himself to finance, even the art films. So it's the constant juggle, not just of keeping them up there, but keeping it broad so that the public and the industry will accept the actor in as wide a variety of roles as they want to do and as you can get them. It's a business that is always closing in. The walls are always closing in on you. Industry, public, want you to operate on a playing field about the size of the head of a pin in terms of range, in terms of what you're allowed to do. And it's the job of the representative, be it agent, manager, public relations, to fight it and keep it broad.
And how do you deal with a big disaster like Revolution? I mean,
there is an advantage to the movie business. I think pretty much unlike the music business, because of the time it takes to post-produce and properly market and get ready a movie. There's a gap, and you keep getting. Speaking of actors, you keep getting them the role in the gap before the next movie comes out, based on the premise that. Of eternal optimism, if you can convince people that movie's great. So it's kind of like surfing or outrunning a wave. You keep working in between so that if the movie crashes behind you, you still have the next one. What happens is that younger actors - younger representatives, not you guys, would make is, we've got a good one here, let's wait. Take nothing, it'll come out and make them a big star. The trick is that if it does that, it's going to do that anyway. But if you wait, then you're gambling on it. If it comes out and you have nothing moving you forward, that's when you're in trouble. So keep moving.
So did you get... Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So did you get Sea of Love for him before Revolution?
Oh, no. Revolution came out, that's when Al changed agents and came to me, and I had to get him back on his feet emotionally and decide what was the next.
But I think I'm going to talk about your job for a second. I think that's probably a really, really important thing, because he probably wasn't finished in the business, and he was going to get other movie offers. But a lot of actors are so frail.
Yeah.
emotionally that it scares them to jump back into the same pond. And I am sure that the hardest thing you had to do was convince him to get back on that horse and ride again.
He became my client in 1986, and Sea of Love came out in 1989.
Right. And there were
a lot of conversations. Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Were you involved in the whole Godfather 3, putting that together?
Godfather 3, yes. Yeah, definitely.
And he was happy to come back into that?
Reluctant, but happy enough. I think there were certain problems on the picture, which I frankly thought was underrated. I think that the expectations became so high that it just could not live up to it. People were, gripping their seats when the curtain, the metaphorical curtain went up. It wasn't fair.
Did you represent Francis then for Godfather 3?
No, I didn't.
I'm learning about Rick Nikita.
Leslie, so Rick...
No.
Rick can get away with booking clients into movies before they come out.
Yeah.
You have to deal with the fallout of a big box office flop.
Right.
Or terrible reviews.
Right. Well, there's sort of two, there's probably more than two, but there's two key moments when you do press. One of them would be for a long lead, and meaning publications or television shows that require 3, 4, 5 months of preparation and interviews and photos, etc., before they appear. The other one being fast breaking, which is done the week that a movie opens. So we sort of have two shots at it. Often for a long lead. And we're working day by day, minute by minute, in a business where you continue to get information. What have you heard about this movie? Did anybody screen? Was there a research screening? What were the scores? What you're booking the director for his next job? Did you see the movie? That kind of networking gives you information on a film. Often a movie isn't available to screen for the long lead process. So it's a little bit safer to do interviews at that point. You can show footage, or if you're dealing with a big movie star, a Nicole Kidman, a Meryl Streep, somebody like that, you don't have to show them.
Sell the sizzle, not the steak.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do press at that moment in time. It gets a lot harder if you are realizing as it gets closer to the release date that it's going to be poorly reviewed, or that it's going to be a commercial failure, or God forbid both. And then you have to support the movie, because an actor cannot continue to get these big checks if they don't bear some responsibility and do some work.
You can't walk away.
You really can't. People do, but they have to have pretty rock-solid excuses, like I'm making a movie in Malta and there's no telephone, that kind of thing. And then if you have to do some press, you have to pick it carefully. And that's where people who do what I do have relationships with editors and with writers and with TV producers. And you find people who perhaps respect the performance but don't like the movie. So the interview can be positive for the individual, but perhaps not endorse the movie and say, drop everything and go see it. Mm. And that's where those long-term relationships come in handy. You can also do an awful lot if your client's willing with photography. And you can get 6 or 7 pages of great photography, maybe the cover of the magazine, and a very little text. Yeah. I shouldn't be telling you all this stuff. Although you have a new job now, so it's okay. Yeah.
When I was growing up in England, American movies used to come out 6 months, sometimes 8 months after the US. Everything has changed in the last 10, 15 years. On a big Hollywood movie now, it's usually coming out day and date worldwide, if not in some territories beforehand, like Russia.
Right, Transformers, I think you mentioned that one coming out.
What have you noticed over the years in terms of how you're dealing with your clients, in terms of traveling overseas to promote, traveling overseas to shoot, actually, Rick? Has it internationalized as a business?
Oh, completely, and as the world has. I mean, the internet and other technologies just made it one big world, and anyone who doesn't see that is I don't know what world they're living in. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory.
So have their jobs changed dramatically, do you think?
Their job, meaning?
The clients.
Oh, yeah. More is expected of them. Just like I think more is expected of almost everyone, certainly in the media world. Each of our jobs, I think, is much, much, much more demanding, much broader in the requirements, ranging from agent to manager to press relations, because there's so much information going around that is unfiltered, that is unwanted, and that is incorrect. You have to be aware of that information on behalf of your client. You simply have to either outrun it or out-volume it. So you have to keep pushing forward. You can't withdraw. Being a recluse doesn't work these days.
Also, I think that if you look, and I've just been dying to do this.
Oh, you got those cheat sheets.
I did look up the top box office movies for Russia, and the top 10 are The Avengers, Men in Black 3, John Carter, Wrath of the Titans, Battleship, Journey to the Mysterious Island, Prometheus, Dr. Seuss's The Lorax, Madagascar 3, and The Hunger Games. Like, all of them, tentpole movies, every single one of them. And I would tell you, just based on what I know and what I've read, of those 10 movies, I think 7 of them, the stars came to Moscow to promote the movie. And from the research that I did, that has a tremendous impact on the box office. And the same holds true in other countries as well. And it's not just the movie stars, but in so much of Europe, directors are really the stars. You take Woody Allen to France, and it's bigger than Tom Cruise in Moscow, I'm sure. And it is so incumbent upon them to accept that responsibility when 60% or more of the worldwide box office is generated from overseas. That's just box office results. If you're looking for financing for a next movie, maybe the small movie that Al wants to do after he's done the big success, chances are that movie's going to come from overseas as well.
Is that written into the contracts, the travel and the marketing responsibilities?
The studios or whomever always tried to get it in the contract, but it's pretty unenforceable, really.
But every now and then, one studio will raise their head and say, if he doesn't do Good Morning America, we're going to sue.
Yeah, good
Which
luck.
they never will.
Not going to happen. But couple of points. Number one, as an aside, and there's a great article on Ben Stiller in the New Yorker magazine, and just when you were talking about stars promoting, and you mentioned Madagascar, it's gotten to the point, the necessity of stars is that Ben Stiller would go around promoting Madagascar, foreign. It wasn't his likeness, and it wasn't his voice.
Right.
But he came. Everybody is Ben Stiller, Madagascar. Everybody nods and applauds. He's nowhere to be found on screen or in the voice. He's like an audience member, but somehow he showed up.
We had that exact same thing.
If it helps the movie.
Hugh Grant was in the Pirates Band of Misfits. And he was, we were scheduling all of the publicity, and the studio was having an international junket in like Cancun or something. And about 2 weeks before the junket, he calls up and he says, I just want to run something by you. My voice is dubbed. I'm not in there. And not only that, but sometimes like the blowfish in Nemo, Finding Nemo, which was Scorsese's voice. It had eyebrows and it looked like Marty. But like the pirate doesn't even look like Hugh. It was so wild. And so we had this whole moment where
Did he go?
He did.
That's my girl. Nice. But as far as foreign awareness or the necessity of foreign, you can't finance an independent film now, correct me if I'm wrong, without foreign being the driving force. And the studios, the same, even though they have their own financing, actors' desirability rises and falls on their foreign appeal, proven foreign appeal. And foreign tends to lag, or at least it has so far has lagged behind, shall we say, American public taste and response, because the releases have been coming out later. So,
It's changing.
yeah, it's changing though. It's definitely changing. But an actor, if their foreign appeal goes down, they will have a lot of trouble getting a job. And a big problem, I think, that isn't really covered for the whole foreign market aspect of things, is that in the U.S., if a star actor chooses to make a small film at a small budget, taking a small salary just to do it, to be part of an ensemble, to work with the great director, he or she is more or less forgiven domestically, more or less, if you present it right. Foreign is totally unforgiving. It just doesn't come out that way. All it is their name next to their last picture and what it grossed. There's no little parentheses saying, oh, but this was an art film, or this was an experiment, or he really wanted to work with this director, or he took a small salary. None of that. Picture, lousy gross, oh, his value's down. So people say, why aren't actors taking more bold risks than doing it? Because it hurts them. They're penalized for doing so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, what about filmmakers, Leslie? I mean, the Scorsese's he's a celebrity, Martin Scorsese. Is he required to commit as much to a film's release as an actor would be?
I think so. I mean, that's what they hope for, because I do think that directors like Scorsese, and he's probably in a category on his own, but, star filmmakers, I think certainly, as I said already, internationally, people go to the movies to see the next, Marty Scorsese, the next Woody Allen movie. But even in America, we're coming up this fall, hopefully. David Chase, the creator of The Sopranos, has his first feature film coming out. James Gandolfini is in it, as are a lot of smaller, unknown talent at this point. And the studio is absolutely saying to him, you are the star of this. Because he's a big deal in America because of The Sopranos. And everyone is anxious to see what he's going to do as a feature filmmaker, writer, and director. And they really are going to be pushing for him to get way out and do a ton of publicity for that movie.
It's in contrast, isn't it, to the movies where the director isn't put out in front of the press, but the actors are, who often haven't worked on the film for 6 or 8 months and are required to talk to the film, which I've always found a bit strange.
Well, certainly on some of these big tentpole movies, you don't see the director talking as much as you see the stars. And I'm sure the studio is saying, Will Smith and, Charlize Theron, all of these people, they're the ones that are going to sell it. So
they're really not talking. The stars they talk about the movie as little as possible, or in the most commonplace terms. They really want to tell the story, to Jay Leno about when they went to the store and this and that, and because they're performers, whereas the director isn't necessarily a performer. I know a lot of directors who are great directors, but they're not going to sit there and entertain you with the fabulousness of their lives. It's kind of like, huh?
And of course, we're not interested in their personal lives, as we seem to be in most actors.
Well, that's the other part of it, where, we're creating this, it's a dog chasing its tail to a certain degree. We want to see more from our celebrities. We want them to be on television. We want print journalists to ask more provocative questions. We want to see the pictures of them buying coffee at Starbucks. But in the process, what we're doing is we're breaking down their mystique. And when we break down their mystique, are people going to lose interest in them and not care to see their next film?
Why would you pay exorbitant amounts to see someone who, up there being the romantic lead, be it, man or woman, if you just saw a picture of them, staggering out at Starbucks, sloshing their latte, yeah, exactly. I mean, to me, I think the column is headed just like us. No, they're not. They shouldn't be. Don't think of them that way. Think of them differently.
I mean, historically, what happened in Hollywood? Hollywood created a sort of mythology around these people.
Well, the studios were designed to protect them.
Yeah.
That was the studio's job. Not now, though. And in fact, I told the story to Rick and Paula the other night. Not only, and let's also remember that the studios are these huge conglomerates that more often than not have television networks, that have gossip shows, that need celebrity, sightings, and the latest gossip and the latest rumor about so and so. At the Los Angeles Film Festival 2 weeks ago, they had a red carpet set up, and at the edge of the red carpet was a curb that went down to the street. Only instead of being a traditional curb where it's about an 8-inch step, this was like a 3-inch step, and the red carpet was over it, so you couldn't see it. I'd gotten there before my client, and I said to the guys there that were the security guys that were monitoring, and right in front of the television cameras, I said, you need to put like a white stripe or a black stripe or something there. Someone's going to trip on that. And they all went, and I asked a second time, and I go, no, it's a red carpet, it'll ruin the look. And I said, and they didn't like it much, I said, no, what you want is for them to trip so that the cameras can get a picture of so-and-so falling on her face.
Now the punchline, did anyone trip?
No.
I've always thought that if you it's the 1940s and Cary Grant is walking down the version of the red carpet, if Cary Grant slipped and fell on his face, the cameras would turn away, and he got up and just say, "I'm all right, boys." And they go, "You okay, Mr. Grant?" Then they'd put the camera back on him. Now they're praying desperately that the star falls down, does something stupid. They're putting banana peels, the oil, anything they can do to make the star fall down.
And it works the other direction, too, where the star does anything they can to get attention. The famous wardrobe malfunction, things like that. And unfortunately, that's a different category of artist. We'll use that term very loosely.
But the internet has changed everything, hasn't it, for that kind of control or that kind of privacy?
It's equal. Everything is equal. All information has the same negligible value. You look at the cover of the so-called glossy magazines, and there's likely to have a reality star from last week as they are Tom Hanks. Maybe more likely. Yeah.
Tom Hanks isn't on the cover of magazines anymore. Too old.
But how do you tell your clients, especially your young clients, how do you train them in coping with this kind of assault on their lives?
Well, especially if you realize that every cell phone is a camera.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, someone's going to get a photograph of it.
I mean, the devil's advocate would say, that's what they asked for, that's the game they wanted to get into.
That isn't, in my opinion. I can make a very strong argument against that. And there are people who get into the game for the celebrity, but I'm making that distinction. Yeah. They want to act, whether it's on the stage or whether it's in a movie or whatever it is. That's what they want to do, and they aren't under any obligation to look beautiful when they go to the supermarket. They're not under any obligation not to have a fight with their spouse at the coffee shop because somebody's in a bad mood. I mean, that's what happens. And the fact that it's become big business, and that's what it is it is a huge business.
I think the younger clients, frankly, are more understanding of it. They grew up in it. It's the older clients who go, what is going on here? I can't leave the house. How could they print that about me? It's not true. Isn't anyone going to retract it? No, because it'll disappear. They'll print something else tomorrow. No.
But in many terms,
there are no retractions on the internet.
A movie star is not only just the marketing tool for the movie, but they are brands in their own right, especially the biggest ones. We see them, advertising eau de cologne and cosmetics and watches, and they lend their image or their mythology, their myth, to any number of things. So they're exploiting it just as much as everybody else.
Well, I think that
exploiting's harsh, but
I think that's a harsh term. No, I think it is harsh. I don't think to be the face of a Lancome product is exploiting. I mean, Penelope Cruz, Kate Winslet.
Yeah. They're not pitching. They're not saying, buy my thing. They're just a beauty shot. They're arguably smelling of whatever. Why not? Yeah. It's not a diminishment. But the older stars are less likely than the younger ones. This is true. How do they smell?
Rick, what are the issues when you're talking to producers about your clients traveling to work overseas to make a movie in Romania or London or Australia? What are the conversations you have at that point with your...
But the private jet, that's all. Whatever was going to drive me out of this business was I think it did, ultimately. It's too many private jets. But in truth, they can't exactly wander through the airport. It's not very, it's not good for anybody to have them doing that.
But I mean, I'm talking about living in New Zealand for 8 months or something. I mean, these are huge life changes.
Look, some people are more adaptable to that than others. Some want to travel, some resist it. I mean, I hardly know him, but I don't think he'd mind. They always said that Michael Caine, when his agent would call him and say, I have an offer for you, he wouldn't say what, he wouldn't say how much, he'd say where.
Because he liked it.
Because he liked it. That's fun. Others go, oh my God, I can't leave. I'll die outside of New York City. It just varies, but in general, I think you are the wandering troubadour. To be in the business as an actor or a director. Yeah.
And it's about, I'm sort of venturing off the publicity trail here, but it's also, as I think Paula addressed earlier, it's about authenticity. And that, I would think, for an actor is the brass ring. And if you have to go to New Zealand to get that.
But on the other hand, when Nicole filmed, Cold Mountain in Romania, because it was cheaper than filming it in Virginia, that we couldn't sell it on authenticity. But it was what it was. These are the necessities of movie making. It is a manufactured product.
From what you've seen of Russia, it's obviously changed in the last 20 years dramatically. A great place to work.
Absolutely. I really don't quite understand why there isn't more filming here. It must be I'm just not well versed enough on it. It must be probably the just regulations, etc., the normal government things that a real effort has to be made by the government of any given country to cut the regulations and encourage filmmakers to come on on both a financial and convenience and I think Paul mentioned it, and expertise, meaning crew, basis. Those are the things. How quickly can I get permission to do what I need? How cooperative are the authorities going to be in that particular spot? What kind of crews do they have? And if the answer is positive to all of those, there's no reason that there shouldn't be a lot of filming here.
Yeah. Leslie, when one of your actors or filmmakers is doing a world tour to promote the film, where are the stops usually?
Well, I think that's changing too. Certainly Japan was always a very big stop, but particularly for the kinds of movies that I rattled off before. Yeah. And then England, France, Italy, Germany, Spain to some extent. South America is really sort of a stepchild. You don't get a lot of requests for the talent to go to South America. I guess the expense to travel all the way down there. Yeah. And it's sort of segmented too. Those are the key places. What I see happening more and more is certainly China has become a stop that a few people get to make. Yeah. And Moscow. Yeah. Moscow's gotten much more important it was really interesting to me because I'm so excited about coming on this, and I was talking to the people who work in my office, and many of the young executives had been here and were giving me advice on like hotels and restaurants and this thing and that thing. And I realized they've all been here already because
with actors. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What about film festivals? Do you get involved in those conversations about where to go and where not to go?
Definitely. On the movie side, I definitely do. I still think Cannes is the granddaddy. The Cannes Film Festival.
It can be a disaster.
It's crazy. I mean, it's just crazy.
As a marketing tool, you better be very
if
careful.
the film falls.
Oh yeah, they boo, they hiss.
They do. I've been there.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Probably the same screenings.
It is really horrifying. The first time you're in a theater of like 2,000 people, and they stand up and they start to walk out, and they're going.
It's tough. And you're sitting there with the client, yeah.
But I think Cannes is still the big one. I think the Berlin Film Festival is very big in Europe, and it's uniquely placed in that it's in the first quarter of the new year, whereas most of the other festivals are situated around some beautiful resort in the warm weather.
Except what I've never figured out is Sundance, which I know is wonderful for new films, and it certainly serves its purpose. And, Sundance has become a necessity from the business point of view. However, from the convenience point of view, it's almost like the anti-festival. Let's think of the coldest place we can do. Let's get a lot of slush, a lot of hills, make it very inconvenient for people to get around at all, to make sure there's bad weather. It's like a test of some kind. If you can, whose idea was that?
Mr. Redford's idea.
Yeah. But again, the impact of it cannot be underestimated at Sundance. So I'm just talking about the physical aspect of it.
Let's talk about the awards circuit that you mentioned earlier. I mean, this has become, again, big business. This is a period of about 3 or 4 months where actors, filmmakers, writers, producers are required to give full attention to the possibility that they might win an Academy Award.
Well, on the panel prior, I was really interested in a lot of the questions and the comments about the artist. And what I found is it was a very unique movie with definitely an international flair and taste, so that it had a broad appeal. It was on the award circuit. But I will tell you, and I don't know the figures, I did not work on the film, the amount of money that was spent for the P&A budget and the awards campaign was huge. And you all are under the illusion that it was a very successful movie. It wasn't, and it isn't yet. But that's good PR, somehow.
And thank goodness it won those Oscars for all
the whole award season, to me, maybe I'm just in a feisty mood, but it's like a death march. I mean, it is painful for all concerned, and I start to wonder just how productive it is for anyone. Especially the Academy Awards. By the Academy Awards, everyone is thoroughly, up to here about the whole thing. There's no suspense because the winners have been predicted, hyped, assured of. I don't mean it's fixed. I mean it's just what's going to happen. And also in a world that is constantly looking forward, it's one of the few situations where all the emphasis is backwards, is on what happened, and every day makes it further back than that movie came out. Then when you saw that movie, it's months into the new year, which I feel that you can almost hear that night a huge door slamming, and no one will want to talk one more minute about anything that happened. Many years ago, I had an Academy Award winner, and this many years ago, before the internet, my first Academy Award winning client, and I came in the next morning, and literally I showed up at 8 in the morning, I had my yellow pad, shows you how long, pencils, I was ready to go. The offers were going to be pouring in for my Academy Award winning client, nothing. I mean, I'm just sitting there, and finally, during the day, I said, she won the Academy Award. I said, oh, yeah, but she's too short, she's too tall, she's too old, she's too young. And I'm kind of sitting there with my empty pad, and everyone had moved on, whereas it was feverish 3 days before that. It was like frenzied. She couldn't walk out of the house.
Well, that's like what you said before about making that deal before the Oscars.
Yeah, that's really it.
So what is it all about then? Is it one would think that it would improve the box office grosses to have all this hype around?
It does, but it varies.
It certainly does, has, and can, but it's not a slam dunk.
Yeah.
No, and also some film that came out, months before and is out of release. Don't think that it's going to be. It's kind of.
What are the clients required to do? They have to go to award ceremonies every weekend for a few months now, and do they have to keep going to parties and
It's visibility. I think there's different, again, there's no formula for this. Certainly what the Weinstein Company did on The Artist, which is, I don't think there was a shopping mall opening that didn't have one of those filmmakers or actors.
That damn dog.
Worldwide, and the dog, exactly.
Dog.
So they worked them hard.
They worked them hard, and then I can tell you.
I know there were doubles for that dog. I have that.
Well, then the dog got sick. Did you hear the dog got sick? I think it was exhaustion.
No, its agent wouldn't let him go out on the tour.
Then, a few years back, I worked on Scorsese's The Departed, and we took the complete opposite approach to that, which is Marty did nothing, not one thing. The thinking was that he had recently been on the road for Gangs of New York, and Harvey had pushed him to every shopping mall opening around the world, as he had done for Hasnavicius and everybody else this past year. And I really felt like people know that Marty Scorsese is a great artist. The Departed was very commercial. It had done well at the box office. And I felt like the last thing he needed to be doing was going out saying, please give me an Oscar. Please, another award, please. So he did nothing that year. So I think there is no formula for it.
And he won.
And he won. And he won film, too.
Yeah.
It was great.
Does it have an impact outside of Los Angeles and New York? Does anybody care? Do audiences in Russia or England give two hoots about who wins an Oscar?
They do. In Russia, they care. Will they go to they watch the Oscars, but do they go to the movie because somebody won?
Well, it is a legitimization. I would actually think it might even mean more over here because we're so inundated with it, and we're the fact. Here's another award is by we I mean domestically for months and months. Whereas here, Academy Award winner. Oh, that hadn't heard of that, but that must be good. Whereas there's no such hadn't heard of that in the U.S.
Is there a sense that when you've worked with a client for a long time, they want to win one?
I think most artists would like to win one.
Never
I don't
heard
think
one
it's,
say they didn't.
I don't think it's what drives them, but I think they still feel the peer recognition is very special.
Yeah.
So I think they would like to, but Meryl Streep is another good example. With Iron Lady this year, everybody thought she'd won a zillion Oscars. The fact of the matter is, she had not won an Oscar in 27 years. So it meant something to her, but life was going to go on. I mean, she went to the Oscars that night prepared to lose because she's so used to losing. And she wasn't going to not go to the parties. She wasn't going to sit at home the next day. Life was going to be just fine. But it meant the world to her when she got it.
Let's go back to younger actors and filmmakers when they're right at the beginning of their career, not the Streeps and not the Chinos. How do you help, assuming you've identified some sort of talent, when do you take on a newcomer?
When you're at that stage of your career as a representative. Right now, well, no, I don't speak to right now. In my later agent days, I would not have been the right agent for somebody who was in the early stages. I really don't feel that I would have. I wasn't playing in that field. I didn't read the scripts where they were looking for those actors. I was just playing a different kind of game, and I don't think I would be as good as some young peer-like person who gets that young person, understands what they want, is in that zone.
Yeah.
So I think you kind of grow with your
at the height of your CAA days, what was the most clients you were representing at any one time?
Well, there's always team. That's somewhat of a false statistic, because to represent a client, first off, there's invariably a team of people. You're rarely alone. And also, each client, you have a certain relationship with them, and they require their own unique brand of communication, which means how much you communicate with them. There's some clients I would speak with every day because that's just how it was. That didn't mean they were more important. Didn't mean that. It just meant that was the nature of that relationship. Others I'd speak to once every few weeks. Oh, you mean the least important once every few? No, there were several who were quite important. That just isn't it. So it is a representation business. You have to tailor it, your style. You have your style, but you have to tailor it to the needs of the client. It's all the needs of the client. It's not your needs. I feel like I only want to speak to him once every 3 weeks. Well, you're going to lose if that isn't what that client.
And in management terms, are you more?
Yeah, I think a manager's job is to
be fully
truly
immersed.
Yeah, be much more immersed. I think that's the job description. So, for instance, Kurt Russell, who I'm managing now, who has been a friend and a client for many years. As an agent, Kurt was one of those guys who he said, Rick, if you want to go out to dinner, have some fun, great. I'm available anytime. Other than that, he said, when there's something good you want to tell me, call me. And my reflex would get the better of me, and I'd call him sometimes just because I hadn't spoken with him in 2 weeks. And we'd be talking, and he'd go, he said, is this an agent, are you like checking in? And I'd go, yeah. He'd go, don't check in. He said, not necessarily. He said, anything cool? Want to have dinner? I said, nah, talk to you. Call me some other time. All depends.
But there are some who need hand-holding.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. They employed me. I'm not supposed to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't speak to you that much. Goodbye, me.
And Leslie, what about you with newcomers? How do you identify them on Rick's recommendation, for example?
That would certainly be one way. Agents often, call because they've been to Russia and seen a movie and identified somebody that's definitely they're going to sign that person, and they want a partner to help publicize that person.
Yeah.
Another way is certainly through the theater. In New York, that's a wonderful advantage. You go to the theater, you see somebody that really has a sparkle, and it turns out that they have an agent and they just got a lead in a television show or something like that. And then the other way really is referrals from other actors that are in a movie with somebody, and they say, you really should have a publicist. You should talk to my publicist. Come in and you do it that way. But I absolutely agree with what Rick says, which is some of Emma Stone, for example, is a client of our agency. She's a great client, a real A-list name to mention. I have nothing to do with her. It's a mistake. It's not the right chemistry, because so much of the representation business is casting, finding two people who are going to connect. And there are other people far better that will connect with her. However, and I'm sure it's the same thing for you, when your younger agent needed to get Jeffrey Katzenberg on the phone and couldn't, Rick was there to make the call.
That's how it works. Yeah.
And that's what we do also. So I think it is generational. It should be generational, but the wisdom and the experience.
Yeah, when you said the number, I realized I didn't answer the number of clients, because there just is no answer. I would carry around a card of people who I thought, the only way I could do it is, would they name me? Not would I name them. That's the fault. That's a false statistic. Would they name me as their on their team? Tell me who represents you if they'd name me. And I guess it was 40 or 45. Not only me, but would it come out of their mouths? So I was about it. One thing worth mentioning is, because I know it's different with Leslie, because it couldn't be more pronounced. The whole agent. How does an agent get a client at that level? And it's pretty nasty business. There are no restrictive rules about poaching someone else's client. You can say anything. You're an agent, you're represented by such and so, but they're just terrible. They've screwed up your career completely. You should be with me. This is somewhere between tolerated and encouraged. And after a while, it just became a drag. And it's one of the reasons I didn't like to do it, because I knew too many of the other agents, and I'd be talking to one of their clients, and I'd see, like, Marley's ghost or something. I'd see them hovering around, and I'd go, I can't do this. But as a manager, there's a little more of an unwritten gentlemanly thing. You're not supposed to, do that to someone who has a manager.
Right.
Because not all actors have managers. All actors have agents, with the rarest of exceptions. Not all actors have managers. It's still as the need suits, but it's a different kind of pursuit. I don't know about you.
No, there's a very, very strong sort of unwritten rule. We would never go after another agency's client. Right. And that's not to say that what hasn't happened is that we've gotten a call saying, Sally is going to leave an agency and is looking for somebody new. Yeah. But that's a very delicate position to be in, because often they start taking meetings before they've let their current publicist know that they'll be leaving. So it's very, very tricky.
Delicate stuff.
Never would we go after somebody who's happy and has a publicist doing a good job.
How aggressive are you in looking at international talent? Do you tend to take them on when they come onto the US radar?
Well, there are agents like David and a woman at CAA, Hilda Quealy, who basically specialize in international stars. Yeah. And more often than not, we get the calls from them saying Gong Li's going to be making her first 2 American English-speaking movies. She should have a publicist. Would you be interested? I can't think of an example where I've been in Cannes and seen a French film and thought we should, because I don't do French publicity. I don't do Italian publicity. So if they're not coming to America for a project, and chances are they don't have the money at that point either, just to have an American publicist.
But also, the thing that Leslie or myself or David, any agent, any representative, the thing you're giving is time. That's the thing you're bargaining away every time you sign a client. It's not like we have some magic button or this, or okay, now you want me, now I'm going to give you this here. It's not that. It's time that you're putting in, and time is only finite. So you have to be very wary of how you're going to expend your time. Otherwise, you're breaking the covenant that you're making with that person on behalf of their career and their life. You have to pay attention, give the time. So you have to be wary. It's not just they're good, I think I'll sign them. It's totally, and especially as a manager, I really have to be wary now, because I'm promising a lot, just verbally and implicitly.
When do you fire clients? Or end your relationship?
Well, it doesn't happen often from my point of view. But when they misbehave, and by that I don't mean that they get drunk and thrown in jail for a drunk driving arrest or something like that. I mean misbehave on sort of a human, ethical level. With your staff? Or? Yeah, oh sure. Definitely there have been 2 A-list stars that we've said, you know what, we can't do this anymore. It's just not working out. Yeah. We're not happy doing it. You're not happy with us. Godspeed.
To me, barring that kind of thing, if you think about it, if you want to, use your word, fire a client, unless there's something like that, some incident or a behavioral thing, if you want to fire a client, probably it's because their career isn't going well enough to make up for the demand on your time. But it's probably, if you feel that way, probably they feel that way. Yeah. So they're the ones thinking, well, if my career isn't going that well. And so what you do is kind of bring it to their attention in as diplomatic a way as possible that, things aren't going so well, are they? So you let them, or at least what I always tried to do, them fire you. That way I didn't have any of the moral responsibility. I could feel victimized. I could, have a glass of wine. And in truth, everything worked out the way I wanted it to.
There's also a key difference many differences between our jobs, but I get paid a monthly retainer.
Yeah, very important.
And whether they're working or not, they're paying me.
Yeah.
So the minute, I'm not faced with that dilemma, because if their career is starting to wane and they're not working a lot, chances are they're not going to want to shell out that money. So we'll go on hiatus. And then if it picks up, they come back. But so on the one hand, it sounds like that's a much better deal. But let me also assure you that I get paid a fraction of what an agent makes in commission on a client. And
especially on an A-list client.
On an A-list client, exactly. An A-list client pays virtually the same amount as an up-and-comer.
It's really, it makes no sense that your job is remunerated that way. It really doesn't make sense because you work really. That's just, pretty much.
It's a thing that you can't break.
Pretty much.
The owners of the top agencies, every now and then we get together and we have lunch and we talk about it.
Why don't we all?
We should all take 5% instead of a flat monthly retainer. But it doesn't work, and it won't work, and you have to think beyond that for more inventive ways of increasing your business.
I love this conversation. I could go on for hours. Get some names mentioned. But it's time for some questions. Over here.
Yes, hi. I heard some stories that a famous A-list American star comes with a project to A or B-list director, and then director wants to go back to the project, time's right and everything, and the agents sit just across the hall from each other, and they don't manage to cross that hall to make the final connection and push the film forward. So if you can please a little bit talk about what drives you to pursue certain projects, and because from the knowledge that I know is that sometimes actors could be really interested in certain projects, but agents won't give that to them.
We'll stop them, Rick?
Agents seem to be vilified today. Thank God I got out of that business. Jeez. I really don't know. Look, I think that being an agent it's a fantastic job. I loved every minute of it until I decided I thought I ought to try something new. But agents only want the best for their clients, and if you guide a career properly, the client will, and therefore you will, make a lot of money. You can't be, you don't hear about somebody saying, he was a huge success in show business, didn't make a dime. I'm sorry, that doesn't work that way. If you're a success, you'll make money, and consequently the representative will. So sometimes it falls between the cracks, and certain agencies are better than others at communicating, and things don't get lost across the hall. But it's the business turns on so many vagaries and strange things, and there's no assurances anywhere. I would always say to my clients that the one thing I can assure you of is that for your entire career, you will either be underpaid or overpaid. You will never be paid the proper amount. You will never go to me, that sounds about right. You're either going to go, how dare they, or can you believe it? There is nothing. There is nothing in between.
Well, I also want to sort of say to the agent's defense that they're receptors of information. They know what the studios are looking for. They know how much money studios are willing to spend on productions at this moment in time. They know what other movies competitive, maybe the same exact storyline. They have all of this information at their disposal, and presumably in their staff meetings they're communicating all of this. And if a project is a passion project for an actor and doesn't get made, there are many actors that are bitter about that. And I hear it because I'm part of a team, and often they like to put the blame somewhere else. They like to say, well, I don't think my agent walked across the hall to do X, Y, or Z. It's easier. None of us want to think that we've had a bad idea or that we failed at doing something. It's much easier, and agents really are a big target, and they work so hard, and they are so diligent, and they don't let any stone go unturned, but clients don't always recognize that.
So you become the beneficiary. If you stick around long enough and you're good enough and lucky enough, you become the beneficiary of such injustice as well as the victim of it. That actor who fires his agent for the wrong reason ends up signing with another agent continue for the wrong reason. So again, underpaid, overpaid.
Question here.
Thank you. Being a festival organizer myself, I'm naturally interested in film festivals. You mentioned Cannes Film Festival, but there are probably only like 3 film festivals that can really influence the box office, like Cannes or Berlin or Venice. But there are hundreds and even thousands of film festivals in the world. So what do you actually as agents do with all these invitations coming from all over the world to clients, to the actors, to be on the jury, to come to this or that film
I send
festival?
them to Leslie when
Yeah.
Leslie,
That's exactly what they
please
do.
handle.
Yeah. How do you handle it? And for example, I don't know, is it possible sometimes some of the actors, for example, they demand a certain fee for a masterclass, for a lecture? Does it happen in your practice? No. How does it work? Thank you.
I think film festivals are very important. I think very few film festivals have a reach beyond their local market. Cannes, Berlin, those certainly reach beyond. The San Sebastian Film Festival is wonderful. The Marrakesh Film Festival is wonderful. The Russian Jewish Film Festival is wonderful. All of these film festivals have a great value in their market. An actor only has so much time. So a lot of it will depend on what myself in conjunction with the experts at the studio think the potential is in these markets and where their time is best spent. And then some of them have the great luxury of maybe they're not making a project for a year and they've always wanted to be a juror. And suddenly they're being asked to go to the Ischia Film Festival. And wow, why not be, in Italy in the middle of whatever month, and soak up the sun and drink the wine and eat the pasta and watch great movies. Like, what's wrong with that idea? So I think, it can be for a couple of reasons that they go, but every single request goes to the client and gets discussed and gets, accepted or not.
Toronto is a very important film festival, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Can you explain, as a North American
Well,
film
it's really
festival?
close to America. They speak English, and it's become sort of more of a populist. It's where moviegoers love to go, and they just hang out and wait in lines for a long time just to see the movie. And it's less erudite, and really, it's positioned at a very important time. In the fall.
Ironically, Cannes is at what is now completely the wrong time. You could not come up with a worse time than May, because the next wave of pictures that are coming out, at least from the Hollywood system, tend to be big blockbusters. They don't want reviews, especially from a bunch of surly European, mainly French critics. It's the last thing they're going to do. And so they keep they don't want the publicity. You'd think, well, if the movie opens in beginning of June, why wouldn't you want the Cannes Festival in the middle of May? No, thank you. Because the last thing they need is some bad review killing the surefire Transformers 3 to box office. So Cannes at the wrong time.
One last question before lunch. Oh, over here.
Hello, the question for Leslie. Can you give an idea to Russian audience how much approximately your service cost if they want to do like PR campaign in the US or something?
Costs?
Are you going to negotiate this for me? For what, an actor, a movie?
Or for a Russian film, for example?
Let's say if a producer with a movie, let's say 5-10 million budget, approach you and they say they want to make like PR campaign in US, like, can you give approximately some numbers, like if they're approaching you?
Yes. Now, the first thing I have to say is it's a big difference to you, to everybody here, a $5 to $10 million budget versus a $100 million budget. But the amount of time and energy that we have to put in to a $5 million film with no big name stars and a first-time director is actually more than what we have to do for Steven Spielberg and Leonardo DiCaprio. That's the inequity of how I'm paid. So, having said that, I would say roughly, to do a release campaign on a movie, roughly $150,000, give or take. I'm saying it as a lump sum because you still have to do the work, whether it's 6 months or 12 months. And if it's 12 months, you spread it over, it's a little less intensive on the part of my staff and myself, but you still have to show the critics, you still have to set the interviews, you still have to do the photo shoots and all of those things. So I would say that, for 150, that's probably a 12-month campaign, or could be.
Leslie, one short question. Speaking about marketing strategy with respect to the independent movies, what's the best timing to start thinking about this strategy?
A marketing strategy for an independent movie. Probably during production, or even before. Yeah.
Right. Because if you can't think of one, if you go, who's going to see this? Then
it's the main problem.
You don't know. Now that's apart from quality. Let's assume. Okay, you say, well, my movie's going to be great, and therefore everyone's going to love it. Okay, good luck, maybe so. But what you have to prepare for is that your movie isn't great, and that it's going to only appeal to those people who it should appeal to by nature of what it is, by its genre, by what it is that is offered, regardless of the execution of it. So you have to think, what's the marketing? How am I going to sell my medium-ish movie? And if you don't have an answer to that, if you can't figure out who it's for, then you got a problem. You have to start right away when you're thinking about it. Because if you can't figure out who it's for in the absence of being the best movie ever made, then you got a problem.
Leslie, what are the materials that you like to see? Good stills, good still photography.
Photography is key. To your point too, Elena, the first image of a movie or of an actor, a character in the movie that goes out starts to set the tone for the marketing. And so you have to be very careful of that. And obviously it's very hard to control if you're filming on streets, city streets, public sidewalks, etc. But stills are extremely important. Behind the scenes footage is very important. And then there's usually a writer who interviews everybody connected with the movie and puts together production material. Yeah. That gives you don't always use exactly what they say, but what it tells you as a marketing person is what is their vision of it. And then hopefully their vision meshes with what the studio needs to market it. And you come up with, the product that you have for press kits.
So normally you're involved from the very beginning of the project.
I'm sorry?
Normally you are involved in the process.
In a perfect world, but we all know the world is not perfect.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for both.